Welcome to Whistleblowers in partnership with Wix Trade Pro. Coming up.
But unfortunately, the show tends to be just a kind of an hour-long apology for things that his officials have got wrong.
You could referee Atletico Real Madrid and the next day I'm leaving. So you're not going to be subject to the abuse and the scrutiny that the Scottish referees have. He's got to walk the streets. People know where he lives. They've got all that scrutiny to deal with and the pressures to deal with, which you don't really have down in England.
Welcome to Whistleblowers. This week, without Ian Ladyman, he's taken full advantage of half-term, but in his absence, we've got the powerhouse of the Daily Mail North and slightly north in England. We've got Jack Gaughan, the Northern Powerhouse. Right, Jack?
I'm all right, how are you?
Very well, mate, very well. And from Scotland, I'm delighted to say that the quote is high of Scots Today. John McGarry, Chief Features Sports Writer, Football Writer at the Daily Mail in Scotland joins us. All right, John?
Good golden yourself.
Yeah, world class. Brilliant to have you on. And Mark Clattenburg is with us today as well. Mr. Clattenburg, where on earth are you? Are you on Gladiators duty today? Where are you?
I've just got back home to Spain after being in Lisbon last night and watching that crazy match unfold against Benfica Real Madrid. But so back in house and looking forward to the show.
It's great to have you on today, gentlemen, in the absence of Ian, because for the first time on Whistleblowers, we're leading with Scottish football. John, it's great, isn't it, at the moment, that it feels that Scottish football seems to be, you know, really challenging the top of the news list, as we would have said in newspaper days. But the thing that's been winding me up is that, is this a four-way battle rather than a three-way battle, do you think, John? Or is that just me clinging on to some hope that somebody might take some points off Hearts?
You know, I mean, you could look at it. I mean, Motherwell, who are sitting fourth at the moment, you know, they would need to go on an incredible run to kind of be part of that conversation. You know, at the start of the season, they drew, I think, the first 5 games. It was incredible. And had they had, at that point, a real top class number 9. Like they had Mika Bire a couple of years ago, who's now at Monaco, the ex-Arsenal guy. Had they had a player like that in the building at that time, I think they'd probably have been 7 or 8 points better off, and they would be right bang in this. I just think they get a little bit too much to do now. I think it is down to the 3 teams at the top, but the difference with previous title races in Scotland, where you invariably had Celtic and Rangers battering other teams into submission and, you know, might get down to goal difference and who can reach 100 points, is that there isn't such a spread in terms of ability. So you've seen the last 2 games, Celtic have played Livingston and Kilmarnock, who are both sitting at the wrong end of the table. They really struggled. I don't think there's a gimme for any team. Rangers go to Livingston on Sunday. That'll be a tough game for them. There's a lot of nerves at play now. You know, I just don't see any of the 3 contenders going out and winning games 4-5-0. I mean, Celtic have now scored injury time goals in the last 3 matches, the middle one being a Scottish Cup game. So I don't think there's going to be such a thing as an easy day at the office for them. So in terms of the media interest and all that, it's just great for us at the moment.
It's a mad story with Martin O'Neill as well. I think he played 11 games, won 10, drawn 1. Mark, I had to ask you about that. You must have refereed a Martin O'Neill team at some stage along your career, haven't you?
I can't remember the referee, might have been fourth official when he was at Leicester, but I've been in his company many times. He's a fascinating character, an absolute. I came across him when I was working for ITV, working in Russia, and he was one of the pundits, and he has some amazing stories, and he's such a great character. And what's nice is that, you know, he had a caretaker spell originally at Celtic, did well. They decided they wanted to try something different, and they've gone back to the old tried and trusted method, and it's reaping its benefits again, because what they're doing at the moment, the players have this no-die attitude and they keep getting late goals, and this is what's making this league incredibly competitive. And I watched the game Kilmarnock Celtic of the weekend, and it was absolutely, it actually got me looked back for football. It wasn't it was brilliant to watch. And when you get late drama, the home team are 2-0 up, playing well, brilliant first half, typical second half, Celtic come out and nick it at the end, and it was just brilliant to watch. And I think Scottish football now, at this moment in time, is going through this brilliant moment where they could actually move on and create better TV deals, create better sponsorships because the league's becoming more competitive.
See that, Jack, I'd love to know, as a neutral in this one, right, without any skin in the game, there are 3 really good managers there. I think Danny Rowe's doing a good job, isn't he, at Rangers? You've got Derek McInnes at Hearts and Martin O'Neill. Of those 3, who do you think has got the necessary credentials to see it through in the title race? How do you see it going?
I think Danny Rowe has done an exceptionally good job since taking over, but you just can't look past O'Neill, can you? Like, I can't believe that O'Neill's bringing up his 1,000th game in management when they play Stuttgart this week. I can't believe he's only just got there. It was a really surprising thing to learn that. And it's like Mark said, Celtic got this never say die attitude of winning late games, or winning games late on. But we're sort of saying that about Liverpool at the start of the season, the Premier League, weren't we? Where they were winning everything in the last 5 minutes. So Hearts is brilliant, but I think the most important thing about this season, I mean, John might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the most important thing is that Hearts aren't going to go away because of Bloom and the recruitment that they can do. So actually, it might just be the start of this becoming a regular 3-horse race rather than a flash in the pan, which we've seen bits and bobs of in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, let's not forget Hibs as well, right? We've made some decent signings, and let's not forget, let's get it in early. John, I've got to get it in. John, I think it's a great point Jack raises there. Derek McInnes is a good manager. They've got good financial backing, but I think Danny Rowe, I think it's 46 from a possible 57 since he came in, and given just how miserable the Rangers fans were before that, he has done a great job so far, John.
Yeah, if you take the kind of league table purely from the point where Rowe came in, Rangers would be top of the league, albeit within that, Celtic had this catastrophic period where they appointed Bill Nancy in between O'Neill, so that kind of does skew it a little bit. But yeah, he's done well, Rowe, because initially he grasped the fact he had to win football matches. He did talk about projects and whatnot. He knew he had to win. And a lot of time it wasn't particularly pretty, but he realised he just had to kind of do that and get to January. And he's got there and he signed 3 or 4 players, including Andreas Skov-Olsen. And it does look like he's managed to infuse the team with a little bit of quality now. The big question in all this is who's going to last the course and distance. O'Neill knows this territory so well, 1,000th game tomorrow. This is the second time this season he's brought Celtic back into the title race. Rowe has done well to this point, and he's been part of our Bayern Munich backroom staff, which have won titles, but he's not been at this point in Scotland before. Very few of these Rangers players have. James Tavernier is actually the only one with a league winners medal. So that remains to be seen. Similarly, I mean, McInnes knows every blade of grass in Scottish football. He's a hugely experienced manager, and he's wringing every drop out of those players at the moment, but he's not won a league title. He's missed a couple of players at the moment as well in Shetland and Devlin. They'll be back fairly soon, and I think that'll be big for them. And Hearts have also got 3 of the next 4 home games at Tynecastle, which I think they'll need that just to kind of reset and go again. So, listen, you can make a compelling argument for each of the 3 teams. That's what makes this such a special year.
Yeah, I was hearing that Lawrence Shanklin was out on Saturday night after the Calcutta Cup win just to get that one in as well, enjoying himself. So he's still managing to relax amidst a really important time for the club. But Jack, see, when you're having your conference calls and your meetings about the paper, how high up on the agenda is Scottish football at the moment? Have you noticed a change in the emphasis at the Mail?
Yes. There's I got asked to look at a feature on Hearts a few months ago, which this time last year I wouldn't have been asked to do. So I did that with someone, which I love doing stuff like that because you talk to people you don't ordinarily talk to. Like, I spend my days covering Man City, so actually going off and doing something else is like really refreshing. And the only other time I've been asked to look at a Scottish story is when Gerrard was at Rangers, which isn't that's not a Scottish story, is it? That's a Stephen Gerrard story, so it's a completely different animal. But yeah, I think it's Well, those, isn't it? You talk to people that have worked in Scotland, like managers and players and things like that, and they just say it's just completely different. It's like a different sport. It just consumes everyone, doesn't it? As you guys know. And I think the sort of TV deals that have been struck, that Mark alluded to before, haven't really showcased the best of Scottish football. And it's that sort of side of it on the back of a season like this that could really kind of help it grow across the not across the continent, across the UK to start with.
Yeah, as I used to work with a guy, Mike Darcy, who was one of the bosses at Sky, and then he came to work at News UK, and he was involved in striking the Scottish football deal with Sky. And at one point there was £12 million on the table. Scottish football said no to it, went with Setanta. Sky said, "Are you sure about that? We think the bubble will burst." Sure enough, the bubble burst. Came back knocking on the door of Sky, and they offered, I think it was something like £1 million. And they were in no position to say no to it. So you suddenly had lost that amount of money. And I think Scottish football's really had a bit of a dip since then when it comes to the finances. But, you know, that's just, you think about the stewardship of Scottish football. But as Mark says, it could really make a difference. But Mark, I wanted to ask you about refereeing during a title charge, right? Do you notice the intensity changes? You know, remove Scottish football for a second, you know, you've probably been in the middle in a mad title race. Does it change the role of a referee?
It puts more added pressure on. And, you know, even just looking at Scotland as an example, the pressure on the Scottish referees will be huge because this season is not a normal season for the referees because you've got more teams involved. There's Hearts, Rangers, Celtic, and also you've got, you know, like John said earlier, off air, that you've got Kilmarnock, Livingston fighting for their lives. So you've got teams fighting for their lives and you've got teams going for the title. So there's this, what's creating this wonderful at the moment with the Scottish football is that everybody's beating each other and the rivalry is so big. So that puts massive pressures on referees. I remember doing in my very first season in the Premier League in 2004, and it was a decider that Crystal Palace had to win at Charlton, and that pressure was immense because you know one decision can, even though it's over 38 games in a season, that one decision is always remembered. And as a referee, you just want to come off that match unscathed without being the talking point and without making really a big decision that people could talk about.
Yeah, John, I can only talk as a fan, right? But I've seen quite a lot of Hibs this season, and I do tear my hair out with some of the refereeing. What's the view at the moment of the stewardship of refereeing in Scottish football?
I think there's a kind of consensus that there's much room for improvement. You know, I mean, obviously, we're 3-4 years into VAR now. Willie Collum, the head of referee, he does a kind of a monthly show, which I think is good, and I think Willie's been really open, and the transparency that he promised he has delivered on. But unfortunately, the show tends to be just a kind of an hour-long apology for things that his officials have got wrong. I mean, I do feel, though, despite everything, that given how tense it's going to be the next sort of 11 matches, I think it's a good thing that we've got VAR, because I think there's less scope for the kind of the decision that Mark alludes to that might just change the destination of a title. Somebody gets an offside wrong. It's you know, that could be, they're never going to be able to kind of go over that one or be allowed to forget it. So it's not been great, you know, but I mean, just in terms of the pressure that officials are under, I mean, there wasn't really any contentious decisions in the games at the weekend. However, people are already now obsessed with the amount of time that's added on at the end of a game. I mean, Celtic get 7 minutes at Rugby Park. They scored in the 7th minute. And of course, you've got Hearts fans and Rangers fans, and indeed the Kilmarnock manager Neil McCann. You know, where did that come from? And you know, all this online stuff. It's just kind of if that's what we're talking about in terms of added on time, then heaven help us come a week on Sunday at Ibrox when Rangers play Celtic, and inevitably there's going to be controversy galore there. So yeah, I don't envy the officials their job at the moment. I just don't think they can win. And you know, with each passing week, the pressure's just going to be kind of ratchet up on them even more.
Yeah, Mark, would you put a marker down on that one, because it is such a big thing. I mean, those two games on Sunday, right, the Kelly Celtic game and the 97, I couldn't believe that goal in the 97th minute, and then the Rangers 4-2, the Hearts. It is a massive conversation point how many minutes are being played after games. So, with your view as a former referee and somebody that's been involved in running the game, how important is it going to be keeping an eye on that with those games that John mentions coming up? Because the scrutiny, the pressure on the referees will be massive on those things.
Yeah, but there's two sides to this, isn't it? Because when teams are fighting for their lives, they start absorbing time. I'm not saying the time waste, but everything seems to take a bit longer because they're drawn against one of the big sides. It happens at all levels of football. So the referee was quite right to add the time on. I just think because Celtic are scoring late in games, there's a focus from Rangers fans and Hearts fans. If Hearts were getting that, Rangers and Celtic would come. If Rangers were getting it, Celtic, it's just the way Scottish football is. When one team seems to get the benefit, because I've been following Scottish football a lot, and it's interesting. When Rangers get a penalty, Celtic fans complain, even though it's Stonewall. It's just the way the mechanics. The referees are with Celtic, they're with Rangers, they're with Hearts, they're with Aberdeen. And the problem you've also got in Scotland, which is one of the most difficult things, a lot of the referees are from Glasgow. And if you didn't have the referees from Glasgow, what could the referee? So you would have, they could only do Aberdeen or the sides out, but the top referees wouldn't be able to chance to referee. When in England, yes, I couldn't referee Newcastle or Sunderland, but I could referee any other team, and anybody that lived in London could referee any team as long as he wasn't associated. For example, if he was a fan of QPR or he was a fan of Millwall, he wouldn't be able to referee them. But I find a lot of referees in Scotland actually are from Glasgow, but it doesn't say that they support Rangers or Celtic. It's just that they're from one of the biggest cities in Scotland.
What can be done about that, Mark, do you think?
You can't. I think referees have just got to be, referees are very professional, and they'll declare at the start of the season who their association is with. If they played for example, in the youth team of Celtic, they would have to declare that. And as a manager like Willie Collum, he's got to make that decision. I remember Hugh Dallas lived quite close to Motherwell Stadium. They could actually see the stadium. And I think it was Andrew Dallas. I remember having a conversation with Andrew Dallas, and he showed us a picture on his mobile from his window in his house, and he could see Motherwell Stadium, but he was allowed to referee Motherwell, and that wouldn't happen in England. And the problem is, because you've got a small group, it's very difficult to accommodate and to make sure that you've got all of these referees, because they're always going to come from the big cities.
You've always said, Mark, that you wanted to referee, particularly an Old Firm game, but do you think there would ever be scope for referees to travel north and south of the border? Would that make any sense?
No, because they're trying to stop that all over Europe. There's a lot of countries. Greece is an example. I remember inviting Scottish referees and English referees over to referee in Saudi Arabia, for example. There is that. A lot of countries are using that because they want to take the pressure away from the big matches because of all the politics and everything. But UEFA are very strong. UEFA don't want to see this. UEFA want to see the associations to be independent. And I think, yes, English trainers, managers, coaches of referees can help in Scotland with the educational side of it. And I think Martin Atkinson, for example, is the VAR manager who used to referee in the Premier League. He's now VAR manager in Scotland. So he's supporting the development of refereeing and the VAR in Scotland. So that's a good sign. But you really want Scottish referees refereeing Scottish football. I would love to have refereed an Old Firm game because, yes, Liverpool, Manchester United was always the big one in England. But that Old Firm game, when you watch it, is absolutely brutal. And to be a part of it, and knowing that you could leave afterwards, it's a bit like refereeing a European game. You could referee Atletico Real Madrid, and the next day, I'm leaving. So you're not going to be subject to the abuse and the scrutiny that the Scottish referees have. Because imagine they referee the Old Firm game in 2 weeks, and there's a decision to make. What's that guy? He's got to go to work, because they're not professional. He's got to walk the streets, and people know where he lives, because they live in a normal housing estate. So they've got all that scrutiny to deal with and the pressures to deal with, which you don't really have down in England.
One of the most depressing things I think I've ever seen in football, by the way, is the Dundee United Falkirk game at the weekend. If you watch where the referee has to go and do his video check for VAR, it's so bleak. Have a little look at it. We'll share it on the socials. John, again, for a lot of listeners, it does get slightly complicated with Scottish football and the split. How does that affect the title challenge here, and how does that affect the battle between those three clubs we've talked about?
Well, the way it'll work is after 33 games, the 12 teams split into the top 6 and bottom 6. So bottom 6 are then trying to stay in the league. The top 6 are going for European places and the title. So they've got to be careful in the sense that quite often there's an anomaly in the fixtures, but the SPFL will do all they can to make sure that doesn't really affect the big three. So, for example, Hearts, who've already been to Ibrox twice, they'll definitely play Rangers at Tynecastle, and they will have to go to Celtic Park as well to complete that. And likewise, the other two teams. Sometimes there can be the odd little quirk, like Falkirk, who people actually forget, given how well they're doing, but they're a newly promoted team. So there have been examples, rare examples down the years where a team has played more away games than home games, but it is pretty rare and it's not happened for a few years. But listen, no matter how these fixtures come out, there'll be somebody moaning about it. You could, for example, have a situation where Celtic, Rangers or Hearts could play away to Falkirk 3 times and only once at home. There are these kind of imbalances. And it's not great, to be honest with you, in terms of that aspect of the split. Having said that, I think the kind of the entertainment value it's going to offer is going to be absolute box office, because you're going to have every game. I mean, things stand at the moment. I mean, Dundee United could, and Aberdeen for that matter, could maybe still sneak into top 6. I think that's unlikely. I think they've probably too much to do. So you're probably looking at Motherwell, Hibs, and Falkirk, who are going to be fighting for fourth spot, which guarantees Europe. 5th might still get you in. So they've got a lot to play for. They're good teams as well. And there's obviously all the kind of the fact that Hibs are obviously not going to want Hearts to win the league. Motherwell probably don't care too much. Falkirk likewise are just enjoying themselves, just having a good season, trying to give a good account. But yeah, it's going to be, if it's intense at the moment, when it comes down to these 6 teams playing each other over the course of 5 games, it's going to be such a pressure cooker atmosphere.
John, what are your instincts telling you then? Who do you think is going to win?
I think you've got a compelling case for every team, and I think the Mark Lyle factor is huge. I mean, he's won 3 titles with Celtic before. He's got a real habit of just ringing every last bit out of players, as we've seen recently. Hearts, despite losing at the weekend, they're in a really good position. They've got home games coming up. They've got big players coming back. They'll remind themselves that they're in a great place. I just think Rangers might nick it just by a point or so. I think they signed pretty well in January. They're in a title race that they probably didn't think they were in after 5 games. They hadn't won any of the first 5 matches. There's a bit of unity about the club that just wasn't there when Russell Martin was in charge, and they've got good form, but an awful lot's going to come down to this game at Ibrox a week Sunday. If Celtic would win their game in hand, they would go level with Hearts and 2 points ahead of Rangers. If Celtic were to win that, they would be 5 points ahead of Rangers, and you're beginning to tick the games down. So that's not one that Rangers would want to win. But if you gave me a free bet now, Gordon, I would put it on Rangers by a nose.
Excellent stuff. Mark, what do you think? Who do you think is going to win it?
It depends if it's me heart or me head. Me heart wants Hearts only because I want to be something different. I would have said Hibs, but Hibs can't do it, of course. But I want me heart saying Hearts because I think it would be great for Scottish football, that break-up. But, my head realises that Hearts have had a great season, Rangers and Celtic have had real difficulties during the season and still are in the title race. So you know that with so many games left, it's going to be one or the other. I just feel the Martin O'Neill factor is just something, and there's just something there that can drive them over the line. That game in hand is huge. And the Old Firm game, if they don't lose that Old Firm game in a couple of weeks' time, I can see Celtic going on and win it.
What a game that's going to be. Jack, the Martin O'Neill thing's really interesting, right? A 72-year-old man, he's come back and he's really worked wonders with Celtic. I think it's safe to say, if you were a chairman of a Premier League club or a Championship side and you were looking at his performance there, he still looks like a sprightly guy, you know, he's still got the energy for it. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that he could be offered a big job after this season finishes in Scotland?
Yeah, I think it is beyond the realms of possibility. But it's a team in the Championship, if you put a young coach next to him that you sort of, I don't know, if we go back 3 or 4 years and think Liam Rosenior, and people were talking about Liam Rosenior being, you know, a next strong coach out of England. If a team had identified someone like that now and said, right, what we're going to do is stick you next to Martin O'Neill for a year or two, you learn Martin O'Neill's trade as well as what you already have in the bank, and then there is a succession planning there. I can see that sort of thing working because he looks like you can see the twinkle in his eye, can't you? Every time he's like, he's doing a bit of press or I mean, the stuff at the weekend where he was comparing the Celtic team to the great one of 20 years ago that had, you know, Larson and Sutton and Hartson or whatever, and it's just like, well, obviously it's nowhere near, is it? But you can see that he loves it, and I hope they do it for him really. Aside from the fact that my surname suggests that I'm probably not massively impartial and the family would want Celtic to win.
No, it's a dangerous game getting into what people's surnames mean in Scottish football. You can't do it.
Come on, Bodie.
John,
give us a prediction.
My prediction?
Yeah.
I think Celtic will do it. I think the Martin O'Neill momentum, especially the way he picked up from the Nancy experiment, suggests to me that there's just the way they won that game at Kilmarnock as well. That felt like a bit of a moment for me. And I think Derek McInnes, I think he's a really good manager, but I've just got this feeling that Hearts will have an East Coast nosebleed. And I am willing that on, full disclosure. You know, 1986 Albert Kid, it happened before, it could happen again. But it's a really difficult, when people say to me, who would you rather England win the World Cup or Hearts win the league? I could be going into hiding for quite a long period of time this summer. And the last time, just to get even further with the superstition, last time there was the year of the horse, it was 1966 when England won the World Cups. The omens are really bad. John, I've got to put that to you. You know, it's a really interesting title race, whatever happens. But what do you think the long-term future is for Martin O'Neill and Celtic?
He has recently maybe hinted just a little bit, because when he first came back second time around, it was very much, I'm here till the summer. Just a couple of things he said led me to believe that he might be open to maybe prolonging that a little. But I think as Jack said there, he's definitely got the twinkle back in the eye. He loves working with these younger coaches like Sean Maloney and Mark Fotheringham. I do wonder if Celtic might try to persuade him to stay in another capacity, whether that's on the board. And I think given the fact Celtic's quite a divided club politically at the moment, I think that would be a really shrewd move. They're also going to have to get some kind of director of football type person in. But I would think Maloney might be more likely to get that than O'Neill. Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who, you know, he just seems to, you know, his ability just to kind of get that X factor out of players is undiminished. And, you know, I mean, given that, you know, how it ended for him at Nottingham Forest, I think he's still pretty sore about that. You know, you could well understand why a big club down south would think, well, why not? You know, we saw what Roy Hodgson and people like that have done in their 70s. Yeah, I think he seems really happy at Celtic, you know, but there is there's a historical thing. You go back to when Jock Stein left the club, and he was effectively moved upstairs, and it never really worked out, and it was really uncomfortable. And Stephen was a football manager, and and they tried to get him this kind of commercial role, and it was just a bad idea. I just don't know. I think Neil likes being the voice of the dressing room before a game. I'm not sure. Maybe 2 or 3 years' time, he might think again. But I think at the moment he feels that he's maybe got another couple of years of frontline football management, whether that's at Celtic or whether somebody down south recognises what he's doing and thinks, well, there's no substitute for experience.
Fascinating stuff. So I think we've got John's has a hint, a feeling that it could be Rangers. Mark's going with his heart and hearts. Jack and I think, are leaning towards Celtic. So we'll see what comes from that. John, thank you very much for coming on. I know you've got to run to a presser, and also we're about to discuss England at length, so I'm sure you don't want to sit around and hear that, do you? John McGarry, thank you very much.
No ball, guys. See you again. Take care.
Thanks, John.
Great stuff, John. Thank you.
Now, before we hear some more of Mark and Ian's thoughts, we're in partnership with Wix Trade Pro, and for any tradespeople out there, this one is for you.
That's right, because Wix Trade Pro is here to save you time and money.
Save 10% every time you shop in-store or online. There's no minimum spend, no hassle, just savings.
Amazing. And what's more, Wix Trade Pro want you to start the new year off right.
That's why they've introduced Smart Water, the award-winning forensic marking technology that's proven to deter tool thieves and make your gear traceable and recoverable. And all it takes is 3 simple steps.
That's right. First, mark your tools with the applicator and solution provided. Then place the deterrent signage on windows and doors before registering your marked tools so they can be identified. If only VAR made things that easy.
You're telling me.
To sign up and start saving, just download the Wix Trade Pro app today.
Right, gentlemen, it's time to talk about England. Thomas Tuchel, the England squad. Lots going on here, Jack. I mean, there's so many things to get into. How do you, before we get into the detail of it, how do you view the England era so far under Thomas Tuchel? Can you sense a change in the mood for England fans and also for the media on this one?
I don't think there's a massive change in mood. I think there was a change in mood when Carsley took the job temporarily last year, where they were playing different football, more progressive football, younger players. And Tuchel, I think Tuchel has decided to go with a bit of a blend between what Southgate was doing and what Carsley did. So, you've seen players like Jordan Henderson have been in every squad. He wants Dan Burn around it. Whereas I don't think that would have happened long term under Carsley. So there's like he's almost blended the two styles. I think expectation levels have amazingly gone up. I didn't think they could get any higher, but I think they have gone up. And it's been interesting to observe Tuchel, because he's his own man. He's not really bothered about what anyone thinks, which is really refreshing, because I think that's the sort of thing that has strangled England managers in the past, where perception has been more important than actually what they've been doing during the camps. But I mean, I actually can't call how it's going to go in the summer. They got through that group without conceding a goal and played well towards the end of it, but it wasn't vintage. But then they have got some exceptionally proper world-class footballers. So I don't know.
Mark, have you enjoyed Thomas Tuchel's England reign so far?
I have. I suppose Gareth Southgate was very successful in where he took England in tournaments, semi-finals, finals, never won. That's the only thing and bleb on his CV. But you look at Thomas Tuchel, they've been, he's blended, like Jack says, he's blended two styles together. And I think what I like about him is he's not allowed any egos, or there's no player certainty within the squad. And I've always been a firm believer of this. If you're in form, it's a bit like a referee. If you're in form, you should get the games. If you're not in form, you shouldn't get a game. And I like the idea that if you're playing well in the Premier League, then you're getting your chance. Like Morgan Rogers, for an example. Morgan Rogers played outstanding for Aston Villa, given an opportunity for England and done really well. So I like the idea that he's given people chances, which I think creates a good competition in a squad, because you're not guaranteed being in the next squad. So you've got to make sure that you're playing for your team. There's no guarantees. They've been really impressive, but how many times it was said that about England in qualification? They've been really, really impressive. But I think the biggest thing for me, which will create the biggest problem for Thomas Tuchel and the England squad going into the World Cup isn't about ability. I think England have got the chance of anybody else to win the World Cup because they've got so much ability within that squad. My only concern is they can't handle the conditions and they don't control the conditions. It's okay, you're going to Florida in a preseason camp, but we all know how difficult it is, the conditions going into America. And that's my only concern, especially after a hard, long season that some of these players are going to have. You look at Arsenal, they're in 4 competitions, Manchester City in competitions, Newcastle in competition. There's so much to play for still in this Premier League. Players now, at that end of the season, they've already done the qualifications, so that's all gone. We've now got to try and get the players at their peak, bearing in mind they're having brutal seasons within the Premier League.
Yeah, so just as a little reminder, Thomas Tuchel signed an extension to his contract. It did a little bit on the radio about it this week, and it does feel like that might just take the attention away from the persistent Manchester United questions, right enough. But looking at it, I think 2 friendlies to come, Uruguay and Japan at home, and 16 of Tuchel's recognised roster are already expected to have seats sorted, according to the research that we've got here. But the big conversation, Jack, the one that seems to be at the top of the news agenda for you guys is goalkeepers. And James Trafford's had quite a lot to say. I mean, what's your take on all of that?
Well, first of all, I feel sorry for him. And he'd said at the weekend that he wasn't expecting Man City to sign Donnarumma he signed Trafford re-signed with City at the end of July. Donnarumma signed on deadline day in September. So I feel, clearly he didn't realise that, the best keeper in the world was going to join the club that he'd just joined. So therefore, he's only playing domestic cup games, hasn't been playing in the Champions League either. Needs, even for a number 3 at the World Cup, needs games. So that has put his World Cup spot in jeopardy, which it just wasn't before. I think he was a shoe-in for the spot. So that then brings Nick Pope into play. City were looking at Donnarumma before they signed Trafford. So in that sense, they did know that Donnarumma was available, and it might be one that they do. So I do feel a little bit sorry for him. Whether playing in the FA Cup, if City go deep in the FA Cup, and obviously they've got the Carabao Cup final as well, whether that's enough, I don't know. It might well be. It might be that Tuchel wants sort of consistency in selection. But I think Trafford next season he needs to be in the war somewhere.
So Jack, just to add on to that, do you think then, you said Donnarumma was available before they signed Trafford and it was always in their back of their mind. But if we recall back to that start of the season, Trafford was going to be Manchester City's number 1. But that start of the season and the mistakes that he was making in them first handful of games must have set alarm bells to Pep Guardiola and the Manchester City fans that we might have to go to plan B, because I think they're seeing Trafford as a progression, didn't it? They thought this guy is a good young goalkeeper. He's going to be at the club a long time. He's going to be Manchester City's number 1. But them first few weeks of the season, if I recall correctly, there was a lot of mistakes happened and people were questioning, was he the right goalkeeper for Manchester City?
Yeah, I mean, there was a high-profile mistake when they lost it against Tottenham at home, where he basically passed the ball into Nico Gonzalez inside City's box and they lost it. It was a poor pass. Basically, what happened with Donnarumma was that PSG wanted £35 million for Donnarumma at the start of the season, and then when it came to August and it realised that City were the only ones at the table, it then became 25 million, and that was perceived to be a number that they would happily do, whereas they didn't want to do 35 for someone with 12 months left on the contract. Guardiola spoke glowingly about Trafford when he joined, but at that point he was the one that was going to be challenging for the number 1 spot with Ederson. But then kind of everyone around the club knew that Ederson was going to leave, so there was always going to be a spot. It was a really sort of, it depends who you listen to really on the dynamics of it.
It's an interesting Newcastle story, though, isn't it, Mark? Because Trafford turned down Newcastle, didn't he? And now he's going to be fighting for a spot against Pope. Do you think has he made the wrong choice? Right? Was it a long-term v short-term thing? What do you think, Mark?
Depends how you look at it. If we don't know what the financial deals were in place at the start of the season, but I think James Trafford looked and thought he could replace Edison as Manchester City's number one goalkeeper. And why wouldn't you play for one of the best clubs in the country and challenge on Champions League, Premier League and cup competitions? Yes, would he have replaced Pope? I think Newcastle saw that as a chance to replace Pope. And you would have seen Trafford as definitely England's number two, because I think without doubt, if there's no injuries, Pickford's England's number one, and Pickford will certainly start at the World Cup. So I don't think Trafford would have ever been England's number one goalkeeper. It doesn't matter how well Trafford did during the season. I think Pickford, what he's done and still does for Everton Football Club, is enough to keep him in as a number one. I just think he would have been fighting. Why wouldn't you have Trafford and Pope? Because what you've got under what other goalkeeper would England choose? Bearing in mind, something could happen to Pickford. Pickford could get sent off. Pickford could get an injury. You need a good number two and number three. And also, the number three has to be a really good squad, because he knows he's not going to get a game, isn't he? He's going to have to turn up at training every day and work with the goalkeepers and train with the goalkeepers. So you need that number three to have the right mentality. If Pope's number two, I'm not sure Trafford could be the number three. I think it'll be interesting if Trafford could be England's number two.
Interesting one. Jack, what about Phil Foden, right? He tends to make a lot of headlines. What appears to be going on there, and what do you think his England involvement will be this summer?
So last season he had a really, really bad time of it. Struggled with his mental health, like we've written quite a lot about it in the paper, the website. This year started okay, but the prevailing feeling from outside sort of Manchester was that he was playing poorly again. But I didn't think he was doing too bad. I thought he was playing quite well. And then he had this like explosion of six to 8 weeks where he was scoring every week, running games, thought he was brilliant. And then he's dipped now massively. And actually, I think he's playing worse now than he was at the start of the season when everyone was saying he was playing really poorly again, which doesn't bode well for him. We're 4 months out from the first game now, and there's a lot of competition in those places. And yeah, I was sort of when he was scoring goals before Christmas, I was expecting him to kick on, and he hasn't, and he's kind of not really been picked in City's best 11 at the moment, and hasn't really done it in an England shirt anyway. So there's big question marks over him, and then that squad that Tuchel picks for March is going to be fascinating because there's so many of them that he could go for.
Question you probably don't want me to ask you, Jack, but would you pick him? Would you start him? Would you play him for England?
I would definitely have him in the squad. Current form, he wouldn't be in my 11. If he was anywhere near his best, he'd be one of the first names on the team sheet for me. And yeah. I think, to be honest, I'm in a minority with that, with England supporters. But I mean, technically, he's away and above the vast majority that they've got.
I think I'm with you on that, Jack. What about you, Mark?
I'm totally agree. I'm a big fan of Foden. I think Foden can turn games. I think Jack's right. He had that little spurt where you're thinking, wow, he's back to somewhere near his best, because if Phil Foden at his best was world class, you put him up there as one of the the best midfielders in Europe, and for whatever reason he's had that dip. And what Thomas Tuchel is being strong on, and you've seen in his team selection and his squad selection, he's picked players on form. At the moment, would he pick Foden? I'm like Jack and yourself, Gordon. I think he has to go to America. I think, we're not just talking about a Phil Foden for now. We've got a Phil Foden for another 2 years. We've got another Phil Foden for another 4 years, another World Cup. And I think it's important that players go to tournaments as well, even if they're not going to play every game. It gives them that tournament, Phil's been in other tournaments, but it gives them the tournament experience, because we're not just talking about the now with Phil Foden. He's young enough to do other tournaments, but Phil Foden, for me, can turn a game. And if you bring him off the bench when England have struggled in the past, he could just turn some magic and we get that victory we need. So if he's going to be an impact player, I'm all for Phil Foden.
Good stuff, lads. Really appreciate it. Jack, thanks for coming on, giving us a bit of England insight there. Mark Clattenburg, as always, appreciate it. Please send us your questions, by the way, for the bonus ball. Whistleblowers@dailymail.com. That's whistleblowers@dailymail.com. Get in touch with us on socials as well if you fancy. Mark, you know what you have to do at the end of the podcast. Would you do the honours and blow the full-time whistle? Thank you very much for watching Whistleblowers. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember, episodes every Thursday and Tuesday, and on a Sunday, you'll get our clip of the week.